Good morning, and welcome from me to the first day of WAF 2021, and a special welcome to Hannah Harris, who joins us from Helsinki, where she is the Chief Design Officer, and where a few years ago I was privileged to see how the city is introducing some of the most far-sighted policies for improving the lives of its citizens, combining both design and social endeavours to do so. So Hannah, over to you.
Well, good morning, afternoon, wherever you happen to be around the world. Here from Helsinki, and a huge thank you for the invite to all the important discussions that will be taking place over the next days. Now, I'll be over the next half an hour or so giving a few insights of what's going on in Helsinki at the moment, how things are looking for the city, and how we as a city are forming certain strategies and policies in order to design for the future, the things that we know, the things that we don't know at the moment. And to start off, I wanted to present you with a little timeline. So I'm working as the Chief Design Officer in Helsinki, and to sort of give you a context of what that means and what kind of perspective I will be giving these next observations and insights from. Of course, we all know that Helsinki as a city and Finland as a country has a strong, long legacy in all things architecture and design, starting from how the nation has been built, how architecture has been a very big part of post-war developments and so forth, of the city becoming or the country becoming urbanized in the first place, but perhaps as the city as more kind of an administrative body or organization. We like to think that this design journey has started 10 years ago or so, and that the kickstarting moment for that really was when Helsinki was World Design Capital in 2012. That is a kind of touring title that is given to cities that in various ways really strategically use design to take the cities into their future. Now, I was actually based in London myself at the time and observing all the various initiatives that took place, events, networks that were built. But the really important thing in this context is that that was kind of the moment when the city, which is the largest single employer in all of Finland, so close to 40,000 people working for the city, started using design thinking. This was the kind of time that service design thinking was coming in as well. So to really look at, okay, the services we are putting out, how we are shaping our policies, how we might enable collaboration across different sectors, and importantly, do it in a way that really works with the people of Helsinki, with the kind of different user groups, if you wish, of the city. So that sort of started from there, and different initiatives then grew out of that. There were follow-up projects. There was first kind of in-house design labs that were put in place, and obviously close collaboration with things such as universities, research partners, or events such as Helsinki Design Week, and simultaneously kind of the work Helsinki was doing with different participation models, or importantly in the past few years with really active digitalization processes started sort of coming in. And along the line there, the position of Chief Design Officer was also formed as a kind of role that is really horizontally working in the city, connecting all the different sectors, all the different units in the city, seeing and finding those opportunities where we could use design even better, and to work sort of internally to build those networks and initiatives, and then importantly, connect them to what's going on elsewhere in the world, in other cities, in other key partners. So a pilot edition took place a few years ago, and I joined in the very same week that the pandemic started, and kind of in this second edition, we really wanted to even more closely perhaps build a link to the urban environment and to architectural things, and hence sort of my citywide position also has one foot strongly in our urban environment division. Now, when I started, the task was really to look at, okay, where are we going with this work at the moment? What have we sort of achieved over the past 10 years? What should we be doing going into the future? And seeing that the pandemic started at the same time when I started my different conversations across the city, I have been doing them, of course, from home. And I wanted to give you a little kind of view into the sort of Helsinki that we are looking at the moment, and where I've been having these observations from. I am currently sit here in Luotila, Eastern Helsinki, one of the kind of early 60s garden suburbs, if you wish, with really, really nice sort of early 60s building stock from like people like Hilding Ekelund. 5 minutes down the road, I've been keeping my mind and body sane over the past year and a half by accessing one of the stretches of the 130 kilometers of open seashore. Helsinki is heavily building on its marine strategies and open access to the sea for everyone, or green areas such as one of the close to 40 allotment spaces that are accessible for people of Helsinki to rent. And then if I take a look slightly to the other direction, just sort of 10 minutes down the road is an area called Itäkeskus Eastern Center, which is one of the largest regional centers of all of Helsinki. It's one of the largest commercial shopping centers in all of the Nordics. On the left, you have some of the early stages of that, the kind of 80s wave that started appearing by Erkki Kairamo here, and that has then expanded into a huge commercial unit, but also it's been coupled with sort of earlier 60s facilities that are some of the most ethnically diverse spots in Helsinki, featuring architecturally as well. For instance, the first escalator that we've had in a public building in Finland, and currently one of the largest urban development spots in Helsinki, the Itäkeskus Center plan, which will involve major transport link connections, major also housing coming there, lots of more pedestrian spaces, and a really big kind of development. And had we not all been working at home for the past year and a half, I would have also been able to grab the tube that's existed in Helsinki for 30 years and take that down closer to the city center to a spot called Kalasatama, one of the sort of former harbor areas that's now been developed. And that is the place where the Urban Environment House is, and where I would be sitting if it wasn't for the pandemic. And this is a building by Lahdelma Mahlamäki Architects, where close to 2,000 people working at the Urban Environment Division in Helsinki have for the first time come together under the same roof, so previously in many different buildings, into a building that was one of the last finalists for the Finlandia Prize for Architecture this year, but also has gone through extensive design work in really bringing these different work communities to work together, and how different spaces can be used to have dialogues with the people of Helsinki, so that we can do what we do in an even better and more open way, and have discussions with the people about the future of Helsinki. And in a way, kind of this personal journey of the seashores, of the spots where the city is growing, and how we might do that in sustainable ways, and how we might organize our city services and works, really tells about the moment where we are as a city now, and where we might be going into the future. Now, we had local elections in the past June, and following from that, we've had a very active period this autumn building the next city strategy for the 4 years to come. And I'll give you a couple of glimpses from that strategy now, and how that kind of guides the work we do in terms of urban planning, design, and architecture as well. The strategy was just recently passed. It's called A Place of Growth, and what that really means is, well, first of all, Helsinki as a city is growing. So in terms of population, we're currently at 650,000. If you look at the metropolitan region, that you can pretty much double that. But the trajectories are that the city will keep growing. There has been a slight mini shift following the pandemic, but we have still, there are more people arriving here all the time. And they come from elsewhere, from Finland, and they come from abroad. And we have currently approximately 140 different languages spoken in Helsinki. At the same time, when we're growing, we are aging and we are becoming more diverse. So these are kind of big population trends going on at the moment. And sort of looking at that background, we want to, of course, enable that how the city might provide for that growth in a sustainable way that's socially, culturally, economically sustainable, and very importantly, in balance with the planet and with nature and climate. So Helsinki has been one of the cities to really set ambitious climate targets. We were previously aiming at being carbon neutral by 2035, and actually in the new strategy, we have pushed that to 2030. So we are now aiming to be carbon neutral by 2030. The growth also means that as a city, we really sort of heavily investing on and really prioritizing learning. So we want to be a city where, in terms of the different learning models we have, the different opportunities for resident well-being for everyone, and also, in course, this sort of reflects, of course, to the learning environments as well, and the building, that we want to prioritize that. So in a way, learn and also share with others while doing that. In terms of the climate work, I think this is very important. It underpins everything that we're doing at the moment. So the city is strategically committed to look at any and every decision we make and how through the lenses of its climate effects. And we've been doing this for some years now, and are currently sort of updating and reviewing those processes and models to really make it as efficient as possible. Now that, of course, kind of reflects sort of the big things that we as a city organization can do, but that also reflects to everyday environmental acts and how we might help also individuals and the people of Helsinki living here, or smaller businesses, to do that. So we're running, for instance, schemes like the Helsinki Energy Renaissance, where the huge building stock, the kind of building stock I showed you in the beginning, so be it from the 60s or 70s, how we might look at energy renovations of these buildings, and how, as a city, we might facilitate and help different housing co-ops to do that. So we are running a scheme to help doing that. And at the same time, we need to look, of course, further into the future. So we've been running things like the Helsinki Energy Challenge last year, which was a global €1 million challenge that had participants came from 35 countries. There were over 250 entries. We worked with 10 finalists and then finally 4 winners. Here is one of them, Karl Ratti Associates Hot Heart. And the aim was really to look at how to provide sustainable heating models for the future, how to decarbonize heating, and not only here in Helsinki, but elsewhere as well. So there's been really heavy work on sharing results, findings, partnerships, new innovation discovered in this challenge, and speaking with cities around the world how to do this. In Helsinki, following the competition, we are working on now the findings, the roadmap, how we will use the results from this competition to help us reach the aim of 2030 carbon neutral city. Likewise, of course, all of this is underpinned by what the urban fabric and structure is, and how that will be arranged in the future. And again, as I was saying, we are growing in terms of population, but how do we do that actually on the map? How on the urban fabric do we enable for adequate amounts of housing while keeping really close look on and even more work in the future in terms of diversifying our green areas and having meeting our carbon targets at the same time. We are in the coming years working even more on in terms of equal development of different neighborhoods, in terms of how to avoid segregation processes in the city, and how to invest in public areas such as parks and playgrounds all across the city. And of course, in Helsinki, like in cities around the world, following different sort of disruptions and changes that are taking place anyway in terms of how people work, how people shop, how people live, but also, of course, the pandemic. There are issues in downtown areas, what we might be doing with them in the future, and how the kind of vitality and the special qualities of a downtown area in a city like Helsinki, what that means in the future. Underpinning this work is, of course, the Helsinki City plan that was approved a few years ago, and which is still very much in line with the new city strategy. So Helsinki is really sort of been developed as a network city where we have lots of work going on rail transport and how the different sustainable transport models are connecting different residential hubs in the city and allowing for the green areas to be managed and kept well in the city. So we are looking at densifying certain existing neighborhoods and doing infill building in these areas. If I can have the next one, please. And the next one as well. So the transport issues are very big. Helsinki is sort of continuously sort of ranking quite high in how public transport is working in the city, and this is very much connected to how we are developing future sustainable land use. Now, in addition, of course, to the kind of transport infrastructure, we are doing quite a lot of work on everyday mobility and how to keep people active in their life. We've had several really successful design projects running in terms of, for instance, how to help the elderly keep active and move in the city. And this, of course, connects to also investments in electrification and how we can help people find those sustainable modes of transport in the future. The remote clicker is still jamming, so if I can have the next slide, please. Cycling is also a big theme in Helsinki. We've just in the past 2 days had our first doses of snow for the winter, but that is not stopping people from moving on bikes. We are quite serious about developing winter cycling as well, and there's a really good network of cycle highways being developed in Helsinki at the moment that will reach to up to 160 kilometers of cycle highways. We call them the banas, which we are developing in the city at the moment. If I can have the next one, please, from there. And underpinning all of this is, of course, sort of the work that we can do in terms of digitalizing certain services in the city. And I would say for the next 4 years, we are really working on how to use data even more intelligently in terms of helping us in for instance, planning decisions. And that brings us back to what our new strategy says specifically about design and what that might mean in terms of few glimpses of what's going on at the moment. So if I can have the next one, please. So in terms of currently, I started with saying that we have a sort of 10-year journey that we are looking in terms of design at the moment, and that of course connects to how we are developing our service needs, how all there are 4 administrative sectors in the city and the central administration, they are all using design at the moment, and we are linking that even more closely with the sort of the digital work that's being done. I can have the next slide, please. So but for the next 4 years we will be aiming at bringing this work to an even more systematic level, so making sure that in all the service development that the city does, and sort of also opening up new modes more towards sort of future forecasting and looking at strategically important spearhead projects that we use design thinking, look at kind of the challenges at hand and work with those different user groups of whatever the challenge or the service is to make sure that we can use design help to make the city an even better place in the future. That also means that we want to continue close collaboration with universities, with businesses, with other cities around the world, with communities such as the World Architecture Festival community, to share what challenges cities have and how we might help design in those areas. And even more importantly, perhaps issues of public space and of the urban fabric, and how the city continues to be a really culturally and socially sustainable place, but also underpinning those climate targets, how we cleverly design our public spaces and are also ready to experiment in them. Of course, during the pandemic, cities around the world have been facing also sort of the immediate needs to use design and look at those public spaces. If I can have the next slide, please. So there's in Helsinki, we've been lucky enough that we haven't had sort of curfews, we've been able to move around. We've been able to, use those 130 kilometers of seashore paths that I showed in the beginning. We've been able to move around on pavements, for instance, safely. We've been able to use the parks. But what we have done is in perhaps certain downtown areas, we were keen to look at providing sort of urban experiences, something culturally dear to the people, and in the process help businesses, and then do it in a way, obviously, that is safe. And in both summer 2020 and in 2021, we looked at central squares in the city center to develop sort of larger summer terraces. This is from Senate Square, which is one of the kind of historical landmark spots in the city center of Helsinki. And outwardly, these went very well. They were very really nicely designed. For instance, here using the grid of the square to enable distancing and safeness. They provided a boost for the local businesses, but also, very importantly, they have helped us as a city how to organize kind of in the back how we do stuff so that we can reach results better. So the sort of creative bureaucracy side of things. And we've taken on many learnings in terms of more permanent solutions of, for instance, how the city uses pavement squares and enables for terraces. But from this, the sort of how the people of Helsinki really, for instance, in this case, fell in love with that spot again. We need to work on, of course, more permanent quality public spaces as well, and be ready to experiment. So if I can have the next slide, please. Here, for example, we are currently working on a new type of public playground with Linda Liukas. Linda is kind of global ambassador for learning about coding and learning about computers. She works with children and teachers across the world, and she has had this lovely idea of doing a playground that teaches about how computers work, but does it without a single screen. And we are working on this playground for central area in Ruoholahti with her. And importantly, this here will be an accessible spot for both residents and visitors. But importantly, it relates to the kind of longer work of both our planning and design departments and our education departments of how we want to develop playgrounds as more accessible places, even more accessible places in the future. So looking at such things going to the future, and that kind of zooming out from that, if I can have the next one, please, of course, is that how do we provide for policies and strategies that really help different sectors in the city, and our planners and designers look at the kind of overall targets of how, for instance, we look at architecture. And we're also currently working on a new architecture program for Helsinki, and it's in its final sort of tweaks and comment rounds here in the city at the moment. I, in my previous job, was also involved in doing similar work there's a national new program coming out for Finland as well. And of course, what cities do is an important partner for the national work as well. Here, certain themes that come out, of course, are, for instance, how the building stock that we as a city manage, maintain and build, that it is done to the best possible ways. Here on the left, a new school by AOR Architects, a recent Dorfman Award finalist. So places such as schools, health centers, and so forth. But of course, at the same time, the housing stock on the right is a recent competition winner by Talli Architects, which is looking at 60s housing stock that will be revamped and extended, and which is really looking at the climate targets, how we can do that. And running there, a really strong theme, again, coupling the demands for the growing population with managing our green areas and green public spaces in the city. Importantly, in this work, we are also looking at how we do competitions, how we communicate about architecture, how we can look at different design tools in the future. And perhaps, if I can have the next slide, please, one of the bigger kind of learnings in that recently in Helsinki has been this building, which is already the new central library by Ala Architects, completed a couple of years back. Now, if I can have the next one, please. So this building has been kind of the flagship for not only one of the 40 kind of local libraries in Helsinki, but also nationally. It has won numerous architecture and design awards, but importantly, it has also been a really kind of big exercise for us in how to involve different, both the workers of the library, the staff, and different user groups of the library. There's been loads of work gone into the concept, working together with the architects, both before completing the building and now that it is running, how to run it in the best possible way. And if I can have the next one, please. So the really big results of this building, I mean, it's really become a building that people love in Helsinki. It's kind of, the people have really taken on to this and sort of cherished the concept of libraries. But importantly, it has increased visitor figures in the entire library network in Helsinki. So not only the landmark building, but also the small local libraries. And this kind of spirit of how we make sure that that we invest in quality architecture and design for all the people of Helsinki, and do it in the way that we are really finding those different ownerships, is something that we want to work on even more closely in the future. If I can have the next one, please. So we are looking at also in the suburban spots of Helsinki, in the growing spots, different urban renewal areas, to further develop processes of how we develop those public spots, do placemaking, what that means as a city, how we do that, how does that kind of organize itself, and how we make sure that we can carry different time spans, so the kind of changes that are visible for people immediately in those important places for them locally, and how that information and those things that we can experiment feeds into, for instance, longer and further land use changes in the future. And next one, please. And wrapping up towards the end, so those spots of how and where we communicate about architecture and design, and about how they can be really crucial in how we build our futures, both in cities and beyond. In the future, one of those spots for us in the future will be a new architecture and design museum. Like already the Central Library, this has been a project that there's been sort of demand for it, both locally, nationally, and internationally, for quite a while. And now I'm happy to say that we are in the point that the Finnish state and the city of Helsinki are working together to set up a new museum that will combine the current Museum of Finnish Architecture and the Design Museum into a new museum, where we can really sort of look at the lens of what's happening in these sectors. Where this will be, if I can have the next slide. This new museum will be located bang in the city center of Helsinki, close to the Kauppatori area. There's an area called Makasiiniranta that you can see here in blue in the map, and which has been an area as well that we have for quite a while been considering the future stages of it. And now there has been last year a really big decision about certain sort of harbour and cruise ship facilities that will actually move partially out of this area elsewhere into the city, and which has now unlocked other things that are becoming possible in terms of developing this really important central area with lots of heritage values, as well as a spot that can join the 130 kilometers of open seashore in the Helsinki and become a really great public area for people to enjoy. And there's a quality and concept competition that is undergoing at the moment, and of which the first stage entries will be made public quite shortly. They are being submitted on the 10th of December, and shortly after that will be made public to view. And coming on to early next year in February, we will have selected those entries that will go on to stage 2. And in September 22, we will be having a winner from that quality and concept competition. Following that, we will hold a separate competition then for the actual architecture and design museum that will be located in this area, but very much looking forward to what we will see for the central spot here in that area. And indeed, to wrap up, so we have started our new kind of strategy stage in the city. The next years to come, we know that there's a lot of work to be done. We have to look at all of those decisions that we make through the lens of the climate, keep those targets clear in our mind, and at the same time make sure that the everyday life of people in this city and around cities in the world is as best as we can possibly do. So if I can have the final slide there. In terms of the design work that we do, this is actually great timing, because in 2022 will actually mark the 10th anniversary of Helsinki's journey as a design city, 10 years from when we held that World Design Capital title. And for us, this is an important moment to sort of look back on those 10 years, that what have we learned? What have been the really important things that we want to sort of enhance? Where might there be things that we need to work more on? And importantly, how can we use that work and that spirit and the efforts we put in design and architecture to take us into the future as well? So thank you very much. Lovely to be with you this morning here.
Well, Hannah, thank you very much for that. A very interesting tour d'horizon of what you're doing in Helsinki and how Helsinki will remain what it has been, I think, for the last 100 years or so, one of the most attractive places in the world to live. Now, I don't think it will come as a surprise to any of our viewers that Helsinki has a great tradition and a great future of the design of its physical buildings and spaces. What I think you highlighted that will be less familiar is the idea, the phrase you mentioned right at the beginning of service design, that the way you deliver a really great place to live, which is, I've written in my notes here, educated, diverse, sustainable and healthy, is not just about its physical environment. It's not just about the conventional strategies of urban design and architecture. It's about how you design the services, how you deliver the services. And I wonder if you could really suggest whether you feel that you've had to redefine the notion of design as it is conventionally understood, at least in the architectural community, in order to do this.
Well, yes, indeed. Perhaps that 2012 was one of the big things that it did was extend that notion of design and how it might be understood here, for instance, in Helsinki. So one of the big kind of things has been making sure that we indeed let's take a given. I mean, this would apply to, for instance, a given digital service that the city is doing. For instance, we've got huge work at the moment going on in terms of redesigning the city of Helsinki's website, and what goes kind of on behind the scenes, of course, a lot of content production as well, but very importantly, finding all the different ways that people need that website to work. So there have been different user groups on board working closely with us so that we don't assume things that actually don't resonate with what people need from that website. But then likewise, a good example, for instance, how do we provide for, let's say, housing services for the disabled? Now here, again, it's been absolutely crucial that those in the city who are kind of running these services, so more in the sort of social and health sector, or partnering with them in the urban environment division, so where actually stuff gets built and designed and importantly also maintained, that we get all of these partners around the same table to look at exactly what do we need, how do we, out of those discussions, arrive at really determining what does quality living mean in this context, and make sure that when we are doing different, let's say for cities, of course, when we look at things like procurement, what are we spending our money on and how do we do it in the way that really delivers what it needs to deliver? So here is where the kind of spirit of design broadly understood has been absolutely crucial. And now I think the kind of, for instance, in now the months that I've been with the city, where it's really the power kind of lies in connecting the work that, for instance, the architects do, and let's say in terms of new school design, for example. So the kind of what the schools look like, how will they function, where are they, what is the actual building like, but at the same time then making sure that we have really good systems and rightly timed systems in place for speaking with the teachers, speaking with the maintenance people, speaking with the pupil and so forth. And this is where that kind of power has really been.
And was there a precedent for this sort of holistic thinking in the way Finland really transformed the way food is presented and eaten and its relationship with health? Because as I understand it, 40, 50 years or so ago, Finland had one of the highest rates of coronary heart disease in Western Europe, and the government of the day decided to do something about this, and developed a very comprehensive interlinkage of different approaches relating to education, to health, to design, and to sport. And the consequence was that within a generation, the country has gone from having a very high incidence of coronary heart disease to having one of the healthiest populations, because of people being encouraged both to understand through education, to eat better, through presenting greater variety and quality of food, and also to take exercise.
Well, indeed, this is a good example, and kind of from the past. I mean, the same has in a way gone. The past Venice Architecture Biennale presented a project, for instance, that had very much to do with also those kind of post-war ideas about, for instance, prefabricated housing, where it was crucial that in that case, for instance, designers and industry came together, and what learnings we take from that. Now, the example you presented is a similar case, and in the sort of design work that we're trying to do, and especially themes that don't sort of neatly slot into, let's say, just the education department or just the health sector. So, of course, in an organization of 40,000 people, these are the things we have to work on internally, how to make sure that themes that touch upon many sectors actually get looked at in a holistic way. So, for instance, again, things like how do we organize food and eating at schools, for instance, is something that, again, that we are working on lots today in terms of how things are presented on the menu, how they are in the spaces there, how that connects to work that's done with everyday mobility, be it with young people and children, also a big thing globally as well. Do our kids move enough? Or again, for instance, with keeping the elderly active. So we've been doing quite a lot of design work in those themes as well.
Yeah, I remember being in Helsinki a few years ago and seeing, I think it's the redevelopment of the old fish market, and some of the initiatives being introduced there. For example, given that it's becoming a very large residential community, quite a mixed residential community, trying to establish social groups, and for example on cooking. So if older people are living on their own, they could have some social contact with other people who might be interested in food. And the idea was, I think, very imaginatively and sensitively to how people live and how they think. You didn't have to join, and if you did join and the group took off, it would be extended and supported. But if it didn't, there wouldn't be any sort of compunction about cancelling it and finding something new to do. So I think this sort of imaginative and sensitive, empathetic approach to how people live their lives and how the physical infrastructure and the operational infrastructure that is provided Helsinki gives us a really good example. So Hannah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Jeremy, and we will keep up the discussion.